Clinton Carter woke after Christmas night, exhausted beyond words. But instead of the cramped apartment he knew by heart, he found himself lying in a mansion, firelight dancing across vaulted ceilings and the scent of cinnamon filling the air. His heart lurched when he realized his daughter was not beside him. Near the fireplace sat the woman he had rescued the night before, the one trapped in the snowstorm. When the light caught her face, Clinton froze. It was Vivian Constance, his CEO. But why would a woman of such power bring a single father to her estate? And what secret was she hiding behind those careful eyes? Clinton Carter was 36 years old and worked maintenance and janitorial services at Sterling Tech. His days began before sunrise and ended long after most employees had driven home to warm houses. He lived in a rental apartment with his daughter Matilda, who was 7 years old with curious eyes that seemed to catch everything adults tried to hide. The apartment had 2 small rooms, a kitchen with a stove that worked on good days, and windows that rattled when the wind blew hard. Clinton had once shown real talent in mechanical engineering. Before Matilda was born, he had enrolled in night classes and impressed his instructors with an intuitive understanding of systems and repairs. But when his wife left without warning, taking nothing but her suitcase and leaving a note that said she could not do this anymore, Clinton had dropped out to focus on keeping food on the table. He was a quiet man who never complained and never turned down a request for help, even when it meant staying late to fix a broken heating unit or unclog a drain. The other maintenance workers liked him. The office staff barely noticed him. He wore the same navy blue uniform every day and kept his head down when executives passed in the hallways. Deep inside, he carried a weight he never named aloud, a sense that he had failed somewhere along the way and that his low salary and humble position were simply what he deserved. Vivian Constance was 34 years old and had built a reputation that preceded her into every boardroom. People called her the Ice Queen. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves that contrasted with the sharp lines of her tailored suits. She was beautiful in a way that kept people at a distance, as though admiring her from afar was safer than getting close. She ran Sterling Tech with precision and discipline, and her employees respected her even as they whispered that she never smiled, never showed weakness, never let anyone see behind the mask. What they did not know was that Christmas was the day Vivian dreaded most. It was tied to memories from childhood, to a night of flames and screaming, and hands pulling her from smoke-filled rooms. Every December brought the anxiety back, tightening in her chest until she could barely breathe. This year, she had tried to drive home early to avoid the office party, to lock herself away before the panic took hold. But the snowstorm had come faster than the weather reports predicted. Beneath the power and the cold exterior, Vivian carried pressure that never eased. The chief financial officer, Helen Farah, wanted her position and made no secret of it. The board questioned her decisions. Shareholders watched her every move, waiting for a mistake that would justify replacing her with someone easier to control. Matilda Carter was 7 years old and had learned to read the world through small details. She noticed when her father's shoulders tensed, when his smile did not quite reach his eyes, when he skipped meals to save money. She was a bright child who loved fixing things alongside her father, handing him tools and asking questions about how machines worked. She believed in Christmas magic the way only children can, with absolute certainty that good things could happen if you wished hard enough. Matilda was the one who saw connections adults missed, who could sense sadness even when people pretended to be fine. She became the bridge in this story, the one who would untangle knots of emotion that grown-ups tied too tightly to undo themselves. Helen Farah was sharp-minded and ambitious, a woman who had clawed her way to chief financial officer and now wanted the top position. She was strategic in her cruelty, never striking openly but always watching, always waiting for the moment when Vivian would stumble. Helen kept files on everyone, tracked every decision, and cultivated allies on the board who shared her vision of a company run with ruthless efficiency rather than Vivian's more cautious approach. She had a secret too, something buried in her past that connected to the Constance family, a debt she had never acknowledged and a grudge she had never released. Christmas Eve arrived with a snowstorm that turned the city into a blur of white. Clinton and Matilda were walking home from the grocery store, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air, when they saw the car. It was a sleek black sedan, skidding on ice near the edge of a steep hill. The wind howled, pushing the vehicle inch by inch toward the drop. Clinton did not think. He ran, his boots slipping on the snow, and reached the driver's side door just as it started to slide faster. He yanked the door open and pulled the woman out, half carrying her away from the vehicle seconds before it went over the edge and crashed into the ravine below. The woman was shaking violently, her eyes wide with terror. When the headlights from a passing car swept over them, she flinched as though struck, pressing her hands over her face. Clinton recognized the response, the way trauma could surface without warning, and he knelt beside her, speaking in a low, steady voice. Matilda crouched next to him and reached out to touch the woman's arm. "Don't be scared," the little girl said. "My dad is really good at helping people." It was only when the woman lowered her hands that Clinton saw her face clearly. Vivian Constance, his CEO. The woman who ran the company where he mopped floors and fixed broken machines. She looked nothing like the composed executive he saw from a distance. Her blonde hair was tangled, her expensive coat torn, and her hands would not stop trembling. Clinton noticed something else. As Vivian tried to steady herself, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a long scar running across her wrist. She saw him looking and quickly tugged the fabric down, but it was too late. Then something fell from her coat pocket, a necklace that landed in the snow. Clinton picked it up, brushing off the ice. It was old, the chain tarnished, and engraved with words that made his breath catch. Constance Fire Division, 1998. He looked up sharply. 1998, the year his father had died in a fire while responding to an emergency call. The year that had split Clinton's life into before and after. Vivian reached for the necklace, but her coordination was off, her movements slow. "Please," she whispered. "I need to go home." Clinton asked if she wanted him to call an ambulance. She shook her head violently, panic flooding back into her eyes. No hospitals, no cameras, no one can know. She looked around as if expecting someone to appear from the storm. Clinton did not understand, but he could see she was terrified. He helped her to her feet and asked for her address. She gave it in a whisper. It was across town, in a neighborhood where people like Clinton never went. He told Matilda to stay close and guided Vivian through the snow toward the nearest bus stop, but no buses were running. The storm had shut down most of the transit system. Vivian's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone, but the screen was cracked, the device dead. Clinton made a decision. He would take her home himself, even if it meant walking through the blizzard. Matilda held his hand tightly, and Vivian leaned on his shoulder, her breath shallow and uneven. While Clinton struggled through the snow, Helen Farah sat in her warm office, watching security footage on her tablet. She had been tracking Vivian for weeks, looking for anything she could use. When Vivian had left the office early, Helen had sent someone to follow her discreetly, just to see where the untouchable CEO went when she thought no one was watching. Now, Helen watched the footage her contact had sent, a grainy video from a traffic camera showing Clinton pulling Vivian from the car, another clip showing him supporting her as they walked away. This could be spun a dozen ways, and none of them would be good for Vivian. Helen sent a message to her contact. "Keep following them. Document everything." Clinton, Vivian, and Matilda arrived at the Constance estate nearly 2 hours later, soaked and frozen. The mansion loomed before them, lit from within, and Clinton felt completely out of place. This was not his world. The doors were unlocked, as Vivian had said they would be. Inside, the fire was still burning in the hearth, and the scent of cinnamon hung in the air from decorations Vivian had put up days ago and then avoided looking at. The space was enormous, filled with expensive furniture and art, but somehow it felt empty. No staff, no family, just the echo of their footsteps on marble floors. Matilda looked around with wide eyes. Clinton felt his inadequacy settle over him like a heavy coat. He did not belong here. He should leave as soon as Vivian was safe. But when he suggested calling someone to stay with her, Vivian shook her head. "There's no one," she said quietly. "I sent the staff home for the holiday." She moved toward the fire and then stopped abruptly, her whole body going rigid. The flames. She could not get close to them. Matilda noticed immediately. "She's scared of the fire," the little girl whispered to her father. Her eyes looked sad. Clinton understood then. The necklace, the scars, the way Vivian had reacted to the headlights. Something terrible had happened to her involving fire, and it was tied to 1998. Outside, Helen's people had followed them to the estate. They positioned themselves near the windows with cameras, taking photos of Clinton moving around inside the mansion, of him bringing Vivian a blanket, of Matilda exploring the rooms. Out of context, the images could tell any story Helen wanted. Clinton tried to make Vivian comfortable, heating soup in the massive kitchen and bringing her warm tea. She watched him from the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had found. He moved with careful efficiency, a man used to taking care of people. He checked on Matilda, made sure she was warm, and spoke to his daughter in a gentle voice that carried across the quiet house. Vivian found herself studying him, this man who worked in her building but whom she had never really seen. He had risked himself to save her without hesitation, had walked miles through a storm to bring her home, and now he was taking care of her as though it were the most natural thing in the world. It was so different from the corporate world she inhabited, where every gesture came with calculation and every kindness had a price. As she watched him, something stirred in her memory. The way he moved, the line of his shoulders, the shape of his face in the firelight. She had seen him before, but not at the office. Somewhere else, somewhere long ago. Her mind pulled her back to 1998. She had been a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, when the fire broke out in the old Constance building downtown. Her father had been working late and had brought her along. She remembered the smoke, the heat, the way the flames had seemed alive and hungry. She remembered screaming and not being able to find the door. And then a boy had appeared, older than her by several years, his face streaked with soot. He had grabbed her hand and pulled her through the smoke, his grip firm and steady. He had gotten her out just before the ceiling collapsed. She never learned his name. In the chaos of sirens and emergency responders, he had disappeared. But she had never forgotten his face. And now, looking at Clinton in the soft glow of the fire, she saw that boy again. The resemblance was unmistakable. But if he was that boy, then his father might have been one of the firefighters who responded that night. One of the men who did not make it out. Her throat tightened. She wanted to ask, but fear held her silent. If she was right, then her survival had cost his family everything. How could she face that? How could she tell him? Clinton felt the weight of the class divide pressing down on him. He was a janitor in a mansion, a single father who could barely pay rent standing in a home worth millions. He should not be here. Vivian was his boss, someone so far above his station that even speaking to her felt presumptuous. He told himself he would leave as soon as the storm passed, as soon as he knew she was safe. But Matilda had already fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under a throw blanket, and the wind outside was still howling. They were trapped here, at least for tonight. Vivian kept glancing at him, and Clinton wondered if she was uncomfortable having someone like him in her space. He tried to stay out of her way, to be invisible the way he was at work. But Matilda, even in sleep, had a way of taking up space, of making herself at home. And Vivian did not seem bothered by the little girl's presence. In fact, she kept looking at Matilda with an expression Clinton could not quite read. Something soft, something almost wistful. The power went out suddenly, plunging the mansion into darkness, except for the fire. Vivian gasped, her panic immediate and visceral. The flames flickered, casting wild shadows, and she backed away from them, her breathing rapid and shallow. Clinton moved to her side instinctively. "It's okay," he said. "Just a power outage. The storm must have taken down a line," but Vivian was not hearing him. She was somewhere else, trapped in a memory where fire meant death and darkness meant being lost. Matilda woke up, startled by her father's urgent tone. "What's wrong?" "Stay here with her," Clinton said. He grabbed a flashlight from his bag, a habit from years of maintenance work, and headed toward the basement. If this place had a generator, he could get the power back on. He found it quickly, a high-end system that had malfunctioned due to a blown fuse. With tools he always carried and some improvisation, he managed to get it running. The lights flickered back on, and he heard Matilda cheer from upstairs. When he returned, Vivian was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. She turned when she heard him, and for the first time, she really looked at him. Not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as someone who had just stepped in and fixed something she could not fix herself. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Just part of the job," Clinton said, trying to deflect. "No," Vivian said. "It's not. You didn't have to do any of this." Outside, one of Helen's people tried to get closer to the house, moving through the garden to peer into the windows. Clinton caught movement from the corner of his eye. He moved to the glass and saw a figure dart behind a hedge. "Someone's out there," he said. Vivian's fear spiked again. Clinton told Matilda to stay inside and went out into the storm. The snow was falling heavily and visibility was almost zero. He saw footprints leading away from the house and followed them. The figure was fast, but Clinton was determined. He caught up near the edge of the property, grabbing the man's shoulder. The man spun, camera still in hand, and shoved Clinton back. They struggled briefly, and the camera fell into the snow. The man ran, disappearing into the white blur of the storm. Clinton picked up the camera and returned to the house, cold seeping into his bones. Vivian met him at the door, her face pale. "Who was that?" "I don't know," Clinton said. "But they were taking pictures." Vivian's mind raced. Helen. It had to be Helen. She was the only one who would benefit from making this look suspicious. Vivian thought about the position she was in. A CEO alone in her mansion with a male employee and his child on Christmas night. No witnesses, no context. In the wrong hands, this could be twisted into a scandal that would destroy her. But as she looked at Clinton, snow melting in his hair, his hands still gripping the camera he had recovered, she felt something shift inside her. He had protected her. Again, just like that boy had all those years ago. She suddenly needed to know the truth. "Clinton," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That necklace you found. Do you know what it means?" He met her eyes. 1998. The Constance fire. My father was one of the responders. He didn't make it out. Vivian felt the air leave her lungs. "I was there," she said. "I was the child they rescued." Clinton stared at her, the pieces falling into place. "You were the girl." "Yes," Vivian said. "And there was a boy. He got me out before the building collapsed. I never knew his name." She looked at Clinton, tears forming in her eyes. "It was you, wasn't it?" Clinton could not speak. The memory came back with painful clarity. He had been 14 years old, tagging along with his father that night because it was Christmas Eve, and his dad had promised they would go for hot chocolate after the shift ended. When the call came, his father had told him to wait in the truck, but Clinton had seen the smoke, heard the screaming, and run inside anyway. He had found a little girl, blonde hair and terrified eyes, calling for her father. He had grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit, his father's voice yelling at him to get out. He had gotten the girl to safety, but when he turned back, the ceiling had come down. His father was inside. And then it was over. "My father died saving you," Clinton said, and there was no accusation in his voice, just a statement of fact. "I'm sorry," Vivian whispered, tears spilling over. "I'm so sorry." Matilda, who had been listening from the doorway, walked over and took Vivian's hand. "You didn't do anything wrong," the little girl said. "My dad told me that sometimes bad things happen, and it's nobody's fault. He said his dad was a hero because he saved people. That means you were supposed to live." Vivian looked down at the child, this 7-year-old with more wisdom than most adults, and broke. She knelt and let Matilda hug her, and for the first time in years, Vivian allowed herself to cry. Clinton stood a few feet away, his own eyes wet, and he realized something. He had spent 24 years carrying anger and grief over his father's death. But looking at Vivian now, seeing her pain and her guilt, he understood that she had been carrying her own burden just as long, and neither of them deserved to keep suffering. The next morning, Helen Farah made her move. She contacted the board of directors and several key media outlets, sending them the photos her people had taken. She crafted a narrative. CEO Vivian Constance had disappeared on Christmas Eve and had been found in her mansion with a maintenance worker and his child under suspicious circumstances. She implied impropriety, possible coercion, and a lack of judgment that should disqualify Vivian from her position. The story spread quickly. By mid-morning, reporters were parked outside the Constance estate, and the board had called an emergency meeting. Clinton saw the news vans arriving and understood immediately what was happening. He was being made into the villain, a low-level employee who had somehow manipulated his way into the CEO's home. He turned to Vivian. "I should go," he said. "This is going to ruin you." "No," Vivian said, and her voice was stronger than he had heard it before. "You're not going anywhere." She called her lawyer and her head of security and demanded they meet her at the office immediately. Then she turned to Clinton and Matilda. Clinton looked at his daughter, who nodded solemnly, and then back at Vivian. "Yes," he said. They arrived at Sterling Tech together, walking through a crowd of reporters who shouted questions. Vivian held her head high, Clinton carried Matilda, and they did not stop to answer anyone. Inside, the board was already assembled, Helen sitting among them with a carefully neutral expression that did not quite hide her satisfaction. The chairman of the board, an older man named Marcus Whitfield, cleared his throat. "Vivian, these allegations are serious. We need an explanation." "You'll have one," Vivian said. She nodded to her head of security, who connected a laptop to the conference room's display screen. "But first, you're going to watch something." The screen lit up with security footage from the Constance estate. It showed everything. Helen's people skulking around the property, taking photos through windows, trying doors. It showed Clinton chasing one of them off. It showed timestamps that proved he had been there protecting Vivian, not threatening her. Then came footage from traffic cameras that Vivian's team had obtained, showing the accident. Clinton pulling her from the car, carrying her through the storm. "This man saved my life," Vivian said, her voice steady. "On Christmas Eve, my car skidded off the road during the storm. Clinton Carter risked his own safety to pull me out. He walked miles through a blizzard to get me home. And when someone tried to break into my property, he protected me again." She turned to look at Helen, and while he was doing that, my chief financial officer was orchestrating a smear campaign to destroy both of us. The board members looked at Helen, whose face had gone pale. Marcus Whitfield leaned back in his chair. Helen, do you have a response to this? Helen tried to recover, to spin the situation, but the evidence was overwhelming. The board voted to suspend her, pending a full investigation. Several members apologized to Vivian, though their discomfort was palpable. They had been ready to believe the worst. The media narrative shifted quickly once Vivian's team released the full story. The headlines changed from scandal to heroism. Single father saves CEO in Christmas blizzard. Maintenance worker risks life for boss. CEO reveals, I owe him everything. Clinton's photo appeared on news sites, and people began sharing the story, praising his selflessness. But Clinton barely noticed. He was exhausted and overwhelmed and still trying to process everything that had happened. Vivian found him in a quiet hallway, away from the reporters and the board members. I want you to stay, she said. Not as maintenance staff, as a mechanical engineer. That's what you trained to be, isn't it? I didn't finish, Clinton said. But you have the skills, Vivian said. I saw you fix the generator. I saw you improvise solutions under pressure. We need people like you. I don't know if I belong here, Clinton said. You belong wherever you choose to be, Vivian said. And I'm choosing to believe that you belong here, with me and with Matilda, if you'll let me be part of your lives. Clinton looked at her. This woman who had been a stranger 48 hours ago and who now felt like someone he had known forever. Why? He asked. Because you saved me, Vivian said, twice. Once when I was 8 and once 2 nights ago. And maybe it's time I saved you back. That evening, after the reporters had left and the board had dispersed and the crisis had passed, Vivian invited Clinton and Matilda to stay at the estate until they figured things out. Matilda ran ahead, exploring rooms she had not seen yet, and Vivian walked with Clinton through the snowy garden. The storm had cleared, leaving everything covered in white that sparkled under the moonlight. I spent so many years being afraid of fire, Vivian said. Afraid of that night, afraid that I didn't deserve to survive when your father didn't. I built walls around myself because I thought if I stayed cold enough, I could keep the pain out. And now? Clinton asked. Now, I think maybe the walls just kept me lonely, Vivian said. She stopped walking and turned to face him. You don't understand what you've done. You didn't just save my life in that storm. You reminded me that I'm allowed to feel things, to be afraid and still keep going, to accept help, to let people in. You did the same for me, Clinton said quietly. I've spent years thinking I failed, that I wasn't good enough, that my job and my apartment and my life were all I deserved. But you saw something different. You saw someone worth protecting, someone worth defending in front of the board, someone worth believing in. Vivian reached out and touched his shoulder, her hand gentle. You saved me when we were kids, and I couldn't do anything for you then. But now I can. Now we can save each other. Clinton felt something break open in his chest, some tight knot of shame and inadequacy that had lived there for too long. He looked at this woman, this powerful CEO with blonde hair catching the moonlight, and he saw her not as someone above him, but as someone beside him. Equal. Real. Human. Thank you, he said. And the words carried more weight than she could know. Don't thank me yet, Vivian said, and she smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. I'm not good at relationships. I'm not good at letting people close. I don't know how to be anything other than the ice queen everyone thinks I am. Then maybe we figure it out together, Clinton said. I'm not good at believing I deserve good things. So we'll both be learning. Matilda appeared on the terrace, waving at them. Dad, Miss Vivian, come inside. It's warm. They walked back together, and as they reached the door, Vivian paused. Clinton, I want you and Matilda to stay here. Not just tonight, for as long as you need. This house is too big and too empty for one person. And I think maybe I've been alone long enough." Clinton looked at his daughter, who was already nodding enthusiastically, and then back at Vivian. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Vivian said. "I've made a lot of decisions in my career. This is the easiest one I've ever made." 1 year passed. Clinton became the head of mechanical engineering at Sterling Tech, his talent finally recognized and utilized. Matilda enrolled in a private school where she thrived, her curiosity and kindness making her popular with teachers and students alike. Vivian ran the company with renewed confidence, no longer isolated, no longer pretending to be something she was not. Helen Farah was fired after the investigation revealed she had been embezzling funds, and the board issued a formal apology to both Vivian and Clinton. On Christmas morning, the three of them sat in the living room of the Constance estate, which had transformed from an empty showpiece into a real home. Matilda had decorated the tree with ornaments she had made herself, and the scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air. Vivian wore a soft sweater instead of a business suit, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Clinton sat beside her, comfortable in a way he had never imagined possible. Matilda handed out presents, her excitement boundless. When it was Vivian's turn, Clinton gave her a small box. She opened it carefully and found a necklace inside. It was new, the silver chain bright and polished, with a pendant engraved with words she read aloud. "For the girl I saved and who saved me back." Vivian looked at Clinton, tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep it," Clinton said. "Say you'll remember that we found each other twice, against all odds, and that this time we're not letting go." Vivian put the necklace on, and it rested over her heart. "Clinton, I'm never letting you or Matilda go. You're my family now, both of you." Matilda climbed onto the couch between them, and they sat together in the warmth of the fire. Vivian no longer feared the flames. They represented something different now. Light in the darkness, warmth in the cold, safety instead of danger. She thought about the terrified child she had been and the boy who had saved her, and how impossible it would have seemed that they would find each other again decades later. But life had brought them back together, through a snowstorm and an act of kindness and a series of events that could only be called fate. Clinton held his daughter on one side and rested his hand on Vivian's shoulder on the other. He thought about his father, who had died being a hero, and he hoped that somehow his dad knew that his sacrifice had not been in vain. The girl he had saved had grown into a strong, complicated, beautiful woman, and she had saved Clinton right back, not from fire but from a quieter kind of drowning, the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from years of being overlooked. They were three people who had all been lost in their own ways. Vivian, trapped in trauma and isolation. Clinton, buried under shame and low expectations. Matilda, longing for stability and a complete family. And now, through a combination of courage and kindness and sheer stubborn hope, they had found each other. They had built something real from the wreckage of their separate pasts. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle this time, covering the world in fresh white. Inside, the fire crackled and the lights on the tree glowed, and three people who had been strangers a year ago sat together as family, not because of blood or obligation, but because they had chosen each other, because they had seen the best in one another when the rest of the world had looked away. Because sometimes, against all logic and expectation, broken people can come together and make something whole. And in that mansion that had once echoed with loneliness, there was now laughter and warmth and the quiet contentment of people who knew they were home.